Hello, and welcome to the Aquarium of the Pacific. I'm Captain Joe of the Ocean Rangers, and today we're going to learn how to think like a scientist. Now, when you think of science, you might think of something like this. That definitely isn't always the case. Today, we're going to talk with my friend Stacy, who likes to study sharks. Let's go meet up with her and see what we can learn. Welcome back, everyone. I'm here with my friend Stacy, and she studies sharks. Isn't that right?
That's absolutely correct.
Excellent. Now, before we start, I gotta ask you, where's your lab coat?
You know, that's a really good question. I left it at home today. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
As a shark researcher, I don't need a lab coat, so most of my work is actually done in the field. We'll go out on the boat and we'll go fishing on the water, and then come back and analyze that data at a computer.
How did you know that you wanted to study sharks?
It all started when I was really young. I always had a passion for sharks, and I'm sure a lot of you out there probably share this passion with me. And it wasn't until high school that I realized I could make a career out of liking sharks. And so from there, I went to college and grad school and studied marine biology.
Awesome. So, Stacy, when you're out there studying these animals and you're in the field, how are you practicing thinking like a scientist?
Well, the scientific method is always there, and the first step of that is to make observations. So when we're catching our sharks, we're always making these observations and trying to figure out their behavior and the different habitats that they prefer. And for my specific situation, I was interested in their movements.
So after making these observations, what do you do after that? You can't just observe. You got to do something after, right?
Right. So these sharks that we had, we actually put satellite tags on them. That gave us real-time data of where these sharks were. And one really interesting thing that we found was tiger sharks, which most people kind of assume stay near the coast and in really shallow waters. Well, these sharks that we tagged swam thousands of miles into the open ocean.
Wow, that's incredible. Do you have any idea on why they were out there?
So just another question that another scientist maybe wants to ask for a different research project, but it's really interesting because that open ocean is basically a desert. So there's nothing there, there's no landmarks, you know, they don't have their iPhone that
or their
they
compass.
So they can't just figure out where they are based off of technology. They have to have some sort of environmental cue.
And now, so you found your observations and you researched the animals. Now, what do you think might be the reason why they were out there?
So that brings us to the next step in the scientific method, which would be to make a hypothesis. And my hypothesis was that they're using Earth's magnetic field to navigate.
So that's an absolutely incredible hypothesis. How are you going to answer that question? What do you do from here?
Right, so that brings us back to that computer part of science research. So we go on the boat, we go in the water, and then definitely have to go back to a computer and do different analyses.
Awesome, awesome. And now, it's my understanding that scientists work together in testing their hypotheses, and you're not just using your data, you're using this person's data and that person's data, right?
Exactly. So communication between scientists is really, really important. So to do a project, you need to know your background research, and that encompasses reading lots of papers. And some of the papers that I read don't even have to do with sharks. I read papers on homing pigeons and even lobsters.
Now, our students today, they're here learning how to think like a scientist. What is some of the things they can do just at home in the classroom? How can they start thinking like a scientist too?
So you guys are super, super lucky. We actually have live cams in a lot of our exhibits here, and all it takes is for you to start watching these and make your own observations and come up with your own questions.
That's right, and that's how you can think like a scientist. Have a great day learning about our animals here at the aquarium. It's Captain Joe signing out. Welcome to the Aquarium of the Pacific. I'm Captain Joe of the Ocean Rangers, and I'm here at our Amber Forest exhibit. We're going to learn about a very unique ecosystem today called a kelp forest. So let's investigate kelp, or seaweed, just a little closer. So if we take a very close look, right in the middle, you have the stipe. not the stem. It has similarities with plants, but kelp is actually an algae. The next part of the kelp is called the blade. Now, like the leaves of a plant, the blade uses the sun to create food in a process called photosynthesis. Now, if kelp needs sunlight in order to grow food, I wonder how it's constantly up at the top. Oh, I remember. Kelp has something on it like floaties, kind of like when you were a kid learning how to swim. Just kidding. So this is an air bladder, and that's what the kelp use in order to stay up towards the top of the water. So together, the stipe, the blades, and the air bladders create the majority of the kelp frond. But in order to hold the kelp down to the ocean floor, it has a very special anchor called a holdfast. And if you take a very close look at a holdfast, you'll see that it serves also as a micro ecosystem for very small things like barnacles, crabs, snails, and sometimes even octopus. So one of my favorite facts about kelp is that it grows extremely fast. Under the perfect conditions, kelp can grow up to 2 feet per day. And when it grows, it travels all the way up to the top of the water. And once it gets there, it kind of just rests at the top and creates what we call a canopy. A healthy kelp forest can host several hundred species of organisms. You can find fish, invertebrate, algae, birds, and mammals. Some species use the kelp forest as a nursery before leaving for the open ocean, and others live their entire lives hunting and foraging in the thick layer of seaweed. All right, explorers. Well, the best way to learn about the layers of a kelp forest is just to dive right in. So, here we go. The kelp forest has 3 main levels. The canopy, or the top, is where you'll find the fast-moving predators like the barracuda and the white sea bass. The midwater is where you'll find the colorful sheephead, the camouflage kelp bass, and other animals that like to hang out just right in the middle of the kelp. At the bottom, also known as the holdfast, is where you'll find the micro ecosystems that hold those tiny animals. But you'll also find leopard sharks, giant sea bass, and all sorts of different types of rays. So today you've learned all about the different parts of the kelp forest, but now it's your turn to do a little bit of exploring on your own. I want you to use the aquarium's webcams to look for the different parts of kelp, and also I want you to try to figure out where we've placed the webcam in the kelp forest. This is Captain Joe, signing out. Hello, and welcome to the Aquarium of the Pacific. I'm Captain Joe of the Ocean Rangers, and this is our sea otter habitat. Today, we're going to learn a lot about sea otters, who are a very big important part of the food web that is part of the kelp forest. We're going to learn more about this habitat and about ways that you can help conserve it. Just like on land, the base of the food web is made up of things we like to call producers. Now, these are going to be made up of plants and algae, and we call them producers because they can create their own food by using a process called photosynthesis. Now, in the ocean, you'll find large algae like kelp, or you can find very small drifting microscopic algae called phytoplankton. And this kelp and phytoplankton makes the base of the food web in the ocean. The next part of the food web are the consumers. Now, the consumers are going to be eating producers. And if they're eating things like plants and algae, we call them herbivores. Now, some of the consumers eat other animals, and they're known as carnivores. Now, sometimes you might think that carnivores have to be big, like sea otters or sharks, but a lot of times you actually need a microscope in order to see them, like very small plankton called zooplankton. Now, if they like to eat both plants and meat, we call these consumers omnivores. Now, let's take a look at the food web of the kelp forest, with both producers and consumers. Now, in a healthy ecosystem, the food web has a very delicate balance. But what do you think if we would take something out of that balance? Let's say the sea otters. Let me tell you a little story about the sea otters. Now, sea otters have a huge appetite, and they eat about 25% of their body weight every day. Now, hold on. 25% of your body weight. That's like if I ate 185 quarter-pound hamburgers every day. Anyways, sea otters love eating sea urchins, and sea urchins love eating kelp. Sea otters do an amazing job at keeping the sea urchin population balanced. In the 1800s, sea otters were hunted nearly to extinction for their fur, which is the thickest out of any animal on the planet. At the time, hunters didn't know that otters were the keystone species of the food web in the kelp forest. Keystone species means that if the otters disappear, it has huge effects on the balance of the ecosystem. With the disappearance of the sea otters, the sea urchins were now allowed to eat as much kelp as they liked because they had so few predators. This caused a lot of problems in some of the kelp forests along the Pacific coast. Thankfully, sea otters are now protected animals, and their populations are starting to recover. Along the coast, we've also created what we call marine protected areas in order to create healthy kelp forest environments. Kelp forests still need our help. So what are some of the things that you can do to help conserve this beautiful ecosystem? Things like recycling, reducing, reusing, being aware of what you put on your lawns, picking up pieces of trash, because all of these things can make their way down into the storm drains, into the kelp forest. Since we are also consumers that rely on products from the kelp forest, it is also our job to help balance this food web. Picking ocean resources that are sustainable, which means that there will be enough for the future, helps with this cause. Thank you for joining us today, learning more about food webs, the kelp forest, and about ways that you can help it out. This is Captain Joe, signing off. Now let's take a closer look at this kelp or seaweed. You're drooling all down the side of your face. That's why no one takes me seriously. Nailed that. You're a dirty liar, Captain Joe. Let's do it. Hello, and welcome to the Aquarium of France. Is your last day filming? Ooh, that was so sexy. Just like, it was right here. I could almost grab it. Oh, nope, nope. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Oh, thank you. On the land. I'm fumbling on phytoplankton. Ugh. Good morning, Jimmy. Whew, a little breeze going up my shorts. This is real cold.
From where?
Coming down from the bottom. Yeah. No, it's allergies. They're pumping today.
Can you see turds anywhere? I see them.
We're below the turd line. Ugh. I've been trying for weeks to get that CR to pop up there. Put some B-reel in that. I even listened to Michael Jackson this morning to really get my blood pumping.
Hold on,
Omnivore. Omnivores. Best one. Who knows? Zoo.
No, like Zoe.
Zow.
Yodo.
Zope.
Ready?
I'm a consumer. I can put it in my pocket.
Have you interacted?
Clink. Okay. Sorry, I thought I saw something. It's just a ghost. Down. I think it's a great book. Pow. This book was awesome.
This is the one that
Anyways, sea otters eat sea urchins. What's wrong with my eyebrows? On to the next, on to the next. Tim! To help make Tim Tinker shut up. I'm pretty sure he normally talks. Straight tripping.
Okay.
Hell.
Right.
Hell.
Our chair.
Not just anybody.
Okay. No.
I can't do it again. Everything you want in a box to the left. Man, Captain Joe, fire.